So welcome to the Thursday night Breathe in the Book meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 6 p.m. meeting. My name's Kelly and I'm an alcoholic. We do things a little differently than any other big book meeting. What we do is an overview of the 164 pages first, and then we start off where we left off. Tonight we are going to be in fear and sex, because they go so well together. Because we're in the inventory in chapter 5. So, the big book is separated in two different sections. If you're new to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first 164 pages is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The second half after that are the personal stories, both very important. The personal stories change with each one of our editions. We take some stories out, we put some stories in. But the 164 pages does not change. That's our program. And it's outlined in the table of contents in the very beginning of the book. So, we're in the 4th edition. The preface starts off, so in the 164 pages, to review, the preface starts off by saying, we don't change the 164 pages. And we hope when you read this, you go, I felt like that. Wait a minute, I think this might work for me. In other words, that me too, right? Then we have the forewords. There's 4 forewords for the 4 different editions. The first foreword says, this is precisely how we have recovered. The main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered. The foreword to the second edition, in 1955, we threw in some history. And then we have 1976 and 2001, our next 2 editions, and they just kind of update you and tell you what stories we've taken out, what stories we've put in, and how we've grown. The big book starts at the 164 pages of the program basically starts at the doctor's opinion. Okay, that's not Dr. Bob, that's Dr. Silkworth. So our founders are Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. Dr. Silkworth was the lead physician in a well-known hospital that treated people for alcohol and drug addiction in that time, in 1930s. Okay, he helped more than like 30 or 40 or 50,000 alcoholics in his time. In the doctor's opinion, he describes the allergy. So we start off the book, if you're just starting off and you're trying to figure out whether you're even one of us, he starts off by explaining the allergy, by saying, you've got this allergy, you're irritable, restless, and discontented, right? That only something spiritual is going to fix, but we doctors don't have a pill for that. You've kind of baffled us, right? But whatever these men have to say seems to work. And that's his introduction to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But in there, it's a really good gauge to go, oh my gosh, we have this allergy, this phenomenon of craving, where frothy emotional appeal doesn't really work, but something that has depth and weight, like another alcoholic walking through this before us, seems to work. And then the first chapter is Bill's story, our first founder. Just like in a speaker meeting, he tells the story. He talks about how he crossed the line, couldn't stop on his own, self-knowledge availed him nothing, right? He talks about depression, stealing from his family, his wife's purse, one more time, trying, one more time, and then the message being carried to him and the importance of carrying it to another. And there is a solution. We all kind of chime in, those of us that were sober at the time, 40 to 100 alcoholics, and we all said, you know what? A lot of us felt just like Bill. If you think you might be one of us, a real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, come along, we've got a solution for you. In More About Alcoholism, we read it in every meeting, sometimes the very beginning of it, and it starts off by saying, most of us were unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics, right? Nobody wants to admit that they're bodily and mentally different than their fellows. And then it's just like in a participation meeting where we have different stories, like Fred the accountant and Jim the car salesman and the jaywalker. So in there you might have not have related to something in Bill's story, but you might relate to something in More About Alcoholism. And then we've mentioned spirituality a lot. So chapter 4, We Agnostics, is all about don't overthink the God thing. All right? You seem to have lacked the power to be able to do this on your own, right? I know I did. Lack of power, that was my dilemma. So I've got to find something other than the power I lack, a power greater than what I'm lacking to be able to help me do this deal. In other words, don't overthink the God thing. If you've got a God, good. If you don't worry about it. It will come as you do the work. And then we start in how it works with the steps. With steps 3 and 4. And in there, when we read it in a meeting, chapter 5, if you guys remember reading chapter 5 in a meeting, it'll say, our description of the alcoholic. the chapter to the agnostic and our personal adventures before and after make clear these three pertinent ideas? A, oh my gosh, I'm an alcoholic. B, probably no human power, I've lacked that power, has been able to get me to stop, and something bigger than me is going to have to work. God couldn't, would if he were sought. In the original manuscript it says, if you're not convinced of these three pertinent ideas, please reread the book up until this point. That means the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters. But if you are convinced, you're now at step 3. So that tells me that up until there is where I find steps 1 and 2. That, me too. I'm an alcoholic. I haven't been able to do this by myself. Something bigger than me is going to have to work, right? To return me to sanity. Steps 1 and 2. Now, in how it works, which is where we're at now, we go over the third step, self-will run riot, my fear, insecurity, and my wanting to run the show and get away with what I want to get away with, and how we do the third step prayer, that keystone that holds all the steps together. And we did that here, and then we started on our 4th step, which is 3 parts to the inventory process. It starts with resentments, and then we have fear and sex. So that's where we're at tonight. We're going to be in fear and sex, okay? Into action goes over steps 6 through 11, where we find our character, we read our inventory to someone, we learn a few facts about ourselves, our character defects. We're willing to have God remove anything that's keeping us from helping others, and how to clear up the wreckage of our past and stay spiritually fit. Now that we're spiritually fit and we've kind of have gotten that breath, that freedom from the steps, in working with others, we learn how to share it with another, how we reach our hand out to the new person, or sponsorship, the beginning of sponsorship. To the wives, to the family, and to the employers, each one of these, remember the book came out in 1939, we weren't basically just targeting alcoholics, but we were targeting anybody that was going to pick up this book, right? So it might have been a family member or an employer. You got a drunk one of us, send them to a meeting. You got a drunk one coming back. These are some of the things you might encounter. Some very good information in those 3 chapters, including the 4 different stages and descriptions of the alcoholic and what to do with family when we're trying to get sober and in those early days. And then Vision for You, just like in the meeting at the end, we'll read it. And it says, we realize we know only a little. We had, at the most, 2 and 3 years sober when we wrote this book, right? So we're basically saying, we realize we know only a little. Here's our book, Don't Die. And it sums up all of the 164. And the first story is always Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Any questions? Yes! So we're in Chapter 5, How It Works. The inventory process. Last week we went over resentments. We are going to be on page 67. Is everybody there? So you want a quick review of what we did last week with the resentments? Remember, we do the 3rd step prayer. What you got for me, God? Take away my difficulties with me, my fear, my insecurity. I want to get away with it. And let me walk through whatever you've got for me, right? So I'm not trying to self-will my way through everything. And that's the 3rd step prayer. And then we started immediately on this inventory process that starts off with resentments being the number 1 offender. And we talked about getting a little notebook so that we could write them down. Because we're doing not only just our inventory and our resentments, but we're also doing our character defects and amends and everything else as we do the inventory process. So you can have different sections in the little notebook there and write them all down as you go. But in the resentments, we started off with Mr. Brown, what it was that upset me, how it affects me. Those first 3 columns said the prayer. Because every time somebody starts off with an inventory, right? I don't know, I heard something about that. Oh, it's going to be bad. Oh, I don't know, right? But if we go stand over at the coffee bar and somebody goes, why don't you like Susie? You go, well, I'll tell you, she did this, she tried to steal my job, she tried to take my boyfriend, right? We've already done the first couple columns. Easy breezy. We're just saying put pen to paper and write it down. And then, so we're not stuck in that resentment, that hurt, that pain. We make sure and say the 4-step prayer for each one that we said on the list. Okay? So what we did was we started off with like, this person hurt my feelings, did this, tried to steal my dog, whatever. And on the top of page 66, it talks about resentments being the number 1 offender. where it blocks us from the sunlight of the Spirit, right? And with me, when I'm blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit, I'm walking around because Susie at the sober home won't wash that spoon, and I'm like, it's just wrong. And then I'm blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of my thinking returns, and I'm going to be like, I'm out of here, I'm done, right? So the resentments can actually kill us. So if we start off just writing our resentments, sometimes if you have a sponsor that says, just start writing all your resentments down and call me in a couple weeks or when you're done, you're going to be so crazy, right? You're going to be like, because you're stuck in all that stuff that hurts, right? But reading down through the bottom of page 66, it says, when blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit, we can't, the grouch and the brainstorm are not for us. So it means grouch, we're not going to sit there and complain about it. And the brainstorm is not like, I know how I'll get even with her. I'll just get everybody I know to not like her, right? That's not the way we get over it. And it said, fancied or real. So it didn't matter whether this person really did talk about us behind our back or not. They still affect us the same way and could cause me to be blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit, then I could drink and die. So how do I get through that? I say the prayer. And the prayer at the bottom of 66 was saying, it's not where we hear meetings where you go, pray for that one, they're a sick one, right? That's not what this is. It's saying, they, like myself, are perhaps spiritually sick. Save me from being angry. It's the only prayer in the big book that's for ourselves. So God save me from being angry. So as I'm doing that resentment list and I'm writing down this person hurt me, this had me burned up, sore, or pissed off, that I'm also going to go, how can I accept that person just as they are? God save me from being angry so I can get through this inventory. So that's the resentment section, right? Then we avoid retaliation or argument. We don't treat sick people that way. And we put completely out of our minds what the person had done. So we kind of turned the page and we started writing, like if I have dad on the top of this and I wrote a few things that my dad did that upset me, then I turn the page. It's not tit for tat. It's going to be anything that I ever did with dad where I looked at myself, where was I to blame? Where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? So as I'm writing that stuff down on that page, I might go, ooh, I'm probably going to owe him amends for stealing all that stuff that I did from. So I'll turn over to like the page that I'm going to start writing my little list of things for the amends I'm going to make, right? Then, the inventory was ours, not the other person. We had to look at our own faults. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. And I think last week we talked about the fact that when we're writing this inventory out, we're not just writing this stuff down, but we're also filling out what we're going to have for our amends list and our step 8 and step 6, our defects of character, right? So just kind of have another little section where you jot those things down. Because when you get to that page in chapter 6, it goes, you did that when you wrote your inventory. Oh, I was supposed to be doing that? I wasn't supposed to burn it? Wait. We admitted our wrongs honestly and we're willing to set these matters straight. Any questions on the resentment section that we went over last week? No? Yes. So there's 3 different parts to this inventory, remember? That's resentment. Now we're going to go to fear. Ooh. So notice, we're at the bottom of 67 now. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. Oh. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Here's the direction. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Another clear-cut direction. We put them on paper. It doesn't say you have to use my way of putting it on paper or anybody else's, and yes, you can put it on a little scratch piece of paper and put it in your pocket, whatever, but we put them on paper. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. So now remember, a lot of these are prompts. You may get something in your resentment when you were doing the resentments that's going to be a fear, or it's going to be a sexual thing, or it's going to be something, right? It's just wherever it comes up, when you're prompted for it, you write it down. So sometimes the fears aren't going to be related to resentments, but sometimes they're going to crisscross. Why we had these fears? Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? Well, self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem, or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Anybody ever get cocky when you're scared? Yeah. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying on God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite self. What do you think that's referencing? Third step? Yeah? Because we did the third step, right? And even if you're going through the steps as an agnostic, we're just realizing it's not my self-will, I want it this way, I'm going to get away with it, I want it, or my self-pity, my self-seeking, my fear, my insecurities, right? Where I'm trying not to do whatever's right in front of me. The third step prayer, we went, all right, what you got for me today? Put in front of me whatever you want so that I can walk through it without all that in my head. And then I can do whatever's in front of me and then help somebody else. So it's referring back to that because it's saying that we already trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Our self will run riot. We're in the world to play the role he assigns. In the beginning of the third step, we were talking about trying to be the director of the show and point fingers and have everything the way we want it. We're not doing that anymore. We're just assigned whatever role we've got. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, here's a promise of the fourth step. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? Remember, there's promises all through, not just in the ninth step, but in all the different steps. That's one of them. Now, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality a way of weakness. Paradoxically, means quite the opposite. You got to die to live, one of those. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, here's a direction. We let him demonstrate through us what he can do. Now remember, here's another promise, but this is one of those promises with a condition. What we do is we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, here's the promise, we commence to outgrow fear. Commence means begin. Okay? So that's the end of our fear inventory. All right? So now what's some of the fears we're going to write down? And what does that exactly mean? We ask him to direct our attention to what he'd have us be. I am terrified, let's say, one of my fears is because I had 7 years sober and was kind of winging it and pretending I knew all what I thought I knew, right? And now I have 20. And in that middle part there, I was scared then to think, I don't want to get up on my high horse and start sponsoring people again. And it was really one of my fears. I was scared to sponsor people because I had done it before, not knowing this book and kind of winging it. And I thought I might do it wrong, or I might cause myself to get into ego or something else. And it was a fear of mine. And when my sponsor directed me to look at this as a fear and say, I want to ask God to remove my fear of sponsoring people and direct my attention to what he would have me be. So I had to kind of close my eyes and see how God saw me. And he saw me as somebody that was able to help someone else. He was seeing me as all that I could be in my greatest moments. And let me kind of take a deep breath and say, Remove my fear. Let me not think of the way that I was thinking of it when I was in fear. Let me see me as you see me. There's a peace that comes over, and all of a sudden, I commenced or began to outgrow that fear once I saw things the way I would see him see it, right? Am I not sure whether I could, financial insecurity or fear of being alone, anybody else have any that we can think of? That's a big one. So the fear of never being accepted. And when I close my eyes and take a deep breath and for just a moment pause and I go, what would be the most perfect scenario? How would God see it, right? And he sees me amongst all you people, or being part of, being at a roundup or at a convention with people that go, oh my gosh, and know my name. Or walking into one of these rooms and somebody going, oh, hi, Kelly, I'm glad you're back. Let me see how you see me, and then I will commence or begin to outgrow that fear. That's the promise. So once I start thinking of it that way, rather than gripped by the fear, I immediately will commence the promise to outgrow that fear. Whatever fear it is. Yeah. And and I think that when we allow our higher power to kind of work this deal with us, it's amazing how sometimes the right people are put in your path. And I remember I was driving up the freeway and I was all gripped by financial insecurity, and something was going on that week or that month. And I'm not following my own direction or anything, or the directions in the book. I'm just kind of driving and stressing out. And somebody calls me and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to answer this sponsee's call. Oh, And she's like, I'm at the courthouse and I have some I'm fear. And I'm like, okay, well, what's our fear prayer? And she's like, it's about this financial thing that I got to do. And I'm like, well, then let's say the prayer together. God, remove my fear of my financial insecurity and replace it with what you'd have me be. How good does it feel when we finally pay that and we get it? You know what I mean? And take a deep breath. And let's say it 3 times. God, remove my fear of financial insecurity and replace it with what you would have me be. And all of a sudden, then after she hung up the phone, she's all happy and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you're good. You're good. That came at just the right time that I needed to say it. Not necessarily maybe as much as she did, but I did, right? And I love that. It's like divine serendipity that happens in here. So, let's move on. So now we've got our different inventories. We're done resentment. Now we've done fear. Now we're going to get into sex. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, or bewail at the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow a man no flavor for his flair, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. I think last time we got this wrong. Which one's a straight pepper diet? That means abstaining without it, right? One is you get a lot of it, and the other is not enough. Here's a direction. We want to stay out of this controversy. Another direction. We do not want to be the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct. Those are directions. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? So now let's think. We want to stay out. We don't want to be the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct. We'll get to this. But, so does it, ain't my beeswax. Why do I have that written there? Ain't my beeswax. So when everybody comes up and they go, well, I heard we're not allowed to have sex for a year when we start in the program. Well, what's your rule on that? Well, ain't my beeswax. I'm not the arbitrator of anybody's sex conduct. I'm not going to tell anybody one way or another. But we all want to fill some kind of void when we, get in here and you take away my one coping mechanism, right? What I do suggest on that 1-year rule is that I do believe that there's people with 5 years sober that really should not be getting in a relationship that haven't done the work on themselves. And there's some people that have 6 months sober that have done all this work and are helping others do all this work. And it's fine for them to get in a relationship. It's none of my beeswax, right? None of my business. But I do say, know who you are first. And if you've done all your steps and you've done your inventory like we're going to go over right now, then sure. But my second part to that is, or my second suggestion, it's not a rule in the book, is that if you have done the work on yourself and you've got, through your steps and you're like, now I'm ready for a relationship, do not twirl your hair and go, hi, oh my gosh, you're cute, right? In the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because you never make sure that the other person has done the work on themselves. Because you never know whether that person is going to be sent out because redhead with freckles sends them out every time. Who knows? But always reach your hand out first as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and say hello and welcome before you go, well, I've done my steps, now I can start hunting. Right? That's not what that's about. But if you have done the work, you'll know the difference, okay? So, first direction now so far, we're going to review our sex conduct. We don't want to be the arbitrator of anyone else's sex conduct. Next direction, we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been, now I circle these, selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Another direction, we're putting it on paper. Now, my own personal experience. I was like, whoa, can't wait to do my sex inventory. Can't wait. I got some stories I'm going to write down. Man, I'm going to shock my sponsor with these. Ooh, guy on pool table, right? Well, when you reviewed that, was that selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? No, I won the game. It doesn't really belong on the list. Oh, okay. So that one necessarily, I'm going to review them in my head. I'm going to think about each one of them, and I'm going to put it down if selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate came up, right? Any questions? So we're writing this stuff down. I'm looking at where was I at fault and what should I have done. Now here are some of the other ones. Do I have to have sex with somebody to have them on my list here? No. I always say, there's Bill or Bob, right, who's always kind of like had a fancy for me. And I couldn't give him the time of day. But all of a sudden, my arch nemesis in AA comes in. Her name's Susie, right? And she walks in with Bob one day, and I go, oh. All of a sudden, Bob looks really good, and I'm jealous. So I walk up to Susie and Bob, and I give Bob a big hug, and I go, oh my gosh, hi! How are you? Oh, so good. I didn't know you came to, oh, you two are together? I didn't know that. Oh, well, that's so nice. Okay, well, bye. Did I arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness in Susie? I certainly hope so. That was my intention. Did I have to have sex with either one of them? No. Does it belong on the list? Yes. Comes up, write it down, man. How free do you want to be? Write it down. So, we're reviewing these things, and if the words themselves just prompt something in my behavior or who I am, I'm going to write it down. Another thing came up, too, is that my sponsor came up on my sex inventory. I'm sure she loves when I share this. Not because I had sex with my sponsor, but it's the first place that jealousy comes up. Oh my gosh, when my sponsor got a new sponsee, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the... And I'm doing this inventory and I go, jealousy? Ooh. Do I need to write this down? Well, there's no inventory. There's not resentment, this, that. It came up there. It came to my mind then. Write it down. Doesn't matter where it comes up, write it down. That's what I'm saying. The prompts for each one of the different inventories are going to maybe bring something back up for you. It's your inventory, no one else's. Write it down. That would be then, yeah, so that thing with Susie then, that would also, so I'm writing it down on my sexual inventory. Ooh, okay. And I realize that might be something that is a character defect of mine. So I'm going to turn over here to page, where I'm starting to write some of my character defects. I'm going to write, gee, I like to, arouse jealousy and poke the bear. And, yeah, on purpose. That brainstorm that I can do, right? Yeah. Should I write it down? Yes. And then I might even be like, when she gets upset, do the whole self-pity. What? I just went up and said hi. I didn't do anything. Oh. Is that a character defect? Yes. I might want to write that down over there. Okay. Is there an amends attached to it maybe? Oh, I might want to turn that page and make a note to ask my sponsor when I get to that step. Would that be part of it? What do I do there? Okay. But I'm looking at me. So, where were we at fault? What should I have done instead? We got it all down on paper and we looked at it. Any questions? Okay. What we're trying to do, in this way we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. And obviously this is also going to include our personal relationships with people, right? Another thing that came up was my son. I didn't realize when he was little and he didn't understand that mom's right and I'm going to be the one that you got to, and I want to follow him and not let him go to sleep until I'm done with, I know that he understands why I was upset about this thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I do that sometimes in relationships. Ooh. So what I'm trying to do here in learning about me and my personal relationships, my intimate relationships, is I'm building an ideal me and an ideal of what I'm looking for. I might make that wish list the whole time through my sobriety. I want to add to it as I go. I want somebody that I can be authentic with, somebody that is authentic with me. I want maybe somebody that dances, or I want somebody that, that doesn't yell and scream, or I want my ideal, but I want to be this person. I want to be able to not get in the relationship and then become jealous and all of a sudden go, what if they don't like me now that we're together? My character defects that come out. I'm building my ideal me and my ideal that I'm looking for, my ideal relationship. Okay? It's like a wish list. Any questions? We subjected each relation to the test. Each relation. Was it selfish or not? These are directions. We ask God to mold our idea and to help us live up to them. So I'm not necessarily just building this ideal on what I ideally want. I want somebody with a red car. I want somebody that has this. I want, you know what I mean? I want the ideal me as well and help me live up to it. We remembered that our sex powers were God-given. Did you know you had sex powers? Mm-hmm. And therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, here's a direction, we must be willing to grow toward it. A direction, we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm. It says willing. Sometimes at this point, somebody mentioned last week, sometimes we write down these things that we might be owing amends for, but we're not quite willing yet until we get to the next chapter, right? But I'm still going to write it down. Provided that we do not bring about still more harm. So we must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we don't make more harm in doing so. Yeah, I'm going to go knock on Mrs. Brown's door and say, hi, I'm so spiritually fit right now, and I'm just wanting to make an amends that I've been sleeping with your husband for a year. And, okay, bye now. I feel so much better. No. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Just like in the resentments, each one of those items, each one of those people on our resentment list, we wanted to say the prayer. Make sure that we kind of bring God into the picture, right? God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatic about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. If my ideal turns out to be that I like to dress up like a chicken, okay. But that's my ideal, not hurting anybody. That's what I came up with in my inventory process, learned a lot of facts about myself and why I like to dress up like a chicken. Whatever the case may be, okay? Now, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe that we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing these facts. These are facts out of our own experience. So, if we are not sorry, our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. If, let's say, I have an ex-boyfriend that I'm totally in love with, and I keep running over there, sending a postcard to his house. This is very important mail. You must call Kelly right away. And I run over there in the afternoon. We run around the house and woohoo, right? And then I leave and I'm like, oh, because it's not what we had before and I feel bad about it. And that's probably something I shouldn't be doing. Or maybe he's with somebody else and I'm still doing that. Am I going to drink if that happens? Maybe not. But if I continue to do it, yeah. If we continue to do these things, our chances are going to increase that it may cause us to go out and drink. Yeah. But once, I stumbled, I did this again. Maybe I shouldn't. It says, does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. But it's only a half-truth, and it depends on our motives. If we're sorry for what we've done, and have an honest desire to let God lead us or take us to better things, we believe that we'll be forgiven and that we'll learn our lesson. But if we continue to do these things, we're sure to drink. Another example that we just brought up too is that coming into early sobriety and being married and maybe getting the attention in the rooms and not being sleeping with other people other than our married partner, right? That this is not only harming another person but harming ourselves. And we have the choice to continue to do that as we're learning with the self-seeking motives and the things that we do in early sobriety when we haven't quite got through the steps. But if that continues, we are sure to drink. I am not the arbitrator of anybody's sex conduct, but I want to make sure, is it selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Am I arousing jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Am I harming others, being selfish, or myself? I'm just going to check over this little list here. But yeah, if two parties are willing, woohoo, go for it. No, exactly. And this is huge for all of us. Like it says, we all need an overhauling in this, right? Now remember, we have clear-cut directions in here that show precisely how we've done it. But when we get over to working with others, one of the things that we talk about there is that when you ask somebody to walk you through these steps and learn how to do these steps, you want somebody that maybe has had some sober experience that can offer some practical advice. And some of the practical advice would be, and we've heard it in the rooms all the time, until you get through these steps and you don't get involved in a relationship. I, of course, listened to that. I waited at least 18 days in detox before I met my husband. But, yeah. I wanted what he had. So, yeah, but it happens. You hear it, but it happens. But this is why we have strong suggestions as to, do this stuff first before, we learn some facts about ourselves too. Because, yeah, we get all like, no! sorry, I'm going to regress here, but we agnostics, we're like, we don't understand what faith is. But when I go, no, you don't understand, that's real love, and I mean it, I know, I can't prove it, but it's so, I just know, I know this is the one. He's got 3 days more than me. I just know. What do you mean have faith? Yeah. We are not saints. We are not saints. Yeah. So now, we are not theorizing about this. If we keep doing the stupid shit, yeah, we are quite sure to drink. This is based on our experience. So now to sum it up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal partner and me, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them, not having sex with them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets that imperious urge when to yield or to give in to it would mean heartache. So some people can do the thing like, yeah, I've got a friend that, we just, around every once in a while. It's fine. Doesn't affect my sobriety. And, it's been going on, right? Some people, every time they get into, just have sex or whatever, and they haven't done the work on themselves and don't know their ideals and don't know their triggers and things like that, all of a sudden they're like, right? So if that's the case, if it's troublesome, instead of saying, okay, just this once, I'm going to go ahead and do it, we go instead turn to a meeting and put our hand out to a new person or help somebody else. Find out how we can get out of self until we can learn a few more facts about ourselves so that we know what these things are that would trigger us in those feelings. Does that make sense? So, everybody good on sex? So we got our resentments, we got our fears, and we've got sex. And while doing this whole inventory, we found some defects of character that keep popping up. Lying, manipulation, kind of whatever it is. And maybe some amends that we might need to make, right? And if we've been thorough about this personal inventory, we've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments. We've begun to comprehend their futility, their emptiness, and their fatality. Remember, they could kill. We've commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. Remember we said the prayer, God help me not be angry. Help me just accept this person and allow them to be. Help me show them the same patience, tolerance, and pity I cheerfully grant a dear friend. So, we have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. For we look on them as sick people. That's referencing that 4-step prayer after the resentments at the top of 67. We listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. Do you see how it's referencing that 8th step, that amends list that we're making? In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision, that's that 3rd step, decision, and an inventory, the 4th step, of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Yeah, that's the end of the inventory and end of chapter 5.